Okay, for this one, we need to read in 4 numbers, which are all on a single line. So there's always exactly one line of input, but that line has multiple things on it. And then we're just going to output a yes or no. So for the purposes of this video, I'm only focusing on explaining the input part, how to get the input in and break it down. So what we could do, we could read in the line of input, and what I might do oftentimes for debugging is once I read input, you can always print back out what you've read in or what you've broken down to make sure that it's what you expected. So let's go ahead and say I run this file, and we'll type in this line of input. I'll copy paste that. So I see that I get that back. Alright, now this is one big string. This is read in as just a single string with all these digits separated by spaces. So in order to take this one string and split it up into a list of the individual pieces that have been separated by spaces, what we can use is the split method for on a string. Alright, so we're going to take our string itself, the line here, and do a dot split. If you wanted to split on something other than a space, you could use a different separator character. You could specify it. So for example, if these were provided with commas in between, the inputs, you could split them on the commas, but by default it's going to split based on a space. I think that's here in this, yeah, so any white space actually. Okay, so what this is going to produce, if I print it out instead, the pieces, so this here stands for pieces. Alright, let me copy paste that input again. You can see that now what we've gotten is a list of strings. Okay, a list of, in this case, just the 1-digit strings there. Alright, so that's good. Now we're going to need to do some arithmetic on these, or some comparison, or both. So we need these things to be integers, not just strings. Now you can access things one by one. So if I were to print pieces 0 plus pieces 1, you can access things in the list using array notation, or indexing into the list starting at position 0. So let's see what this would produce if we, oops, I want to do that. Let's do 0, 3, 3, and 5. Alright, so you see a 0, 3 there. What that actually did was string concatenation. It didn't do addition. If you want to really see that, we can add one more. And, oops. There you go. So now you can see it's not really doing arithmetic addition. So what we need to do if we were going to want to do addition is make sure all these things are numbers, because then Python uses the plus, that means arithmetic addition. Okay, so if we do that, we see that we get a 6 there, right? Now it's kind of annoying to have to type out int again and again and again, and index each and every piece of the string, and especially if this were a variable number of items on the line, like if you didn't know how many things were going to be on that line of input. In this case there's always 4, but in some problems there'll be a arbitrary number of things on the line. So in any case, what we want to do in Python, what we could do is apply the map operation. We can apply this map function to the splits list, and we'll just tell it to map this int function to everything in that list. Alright, so if we do this now, what we should see is, well, we actually see a map object, so it doesn't quite produce it as a list. If we want to see things as a list, you can explicitly turn it back into a list, although most of the time for the purposes of your program you don't need to do that. So here you can see that now all these things are just numbers. Okay, so now what we could do is we could do things like A is the first thing. Let's just give names to these things, because I'm going to want to do something with these afterwards once I've taken them apart. And actually I'm gonna, again, I'm not focused on the logic behind the solution there, but we're gonna want to have some condition that checks what's going on with these A, B, C, and let's call this one N. and then prints yes or no accordingly. So this should actually work. Let's try running that, and try that input, and that says no. And if we try this input, that says yes, so that's good. Now, one thing we could do better here is if you have a list of things and you know exactly how many things are in that list, you can actually split the list apart and assign it to variables in one go. So this is called tuple assignment in Python. So if you have a list here of exactly 4 things, you can assign it to what's called a tuple of variables all at once, instead of having to individually select out the pieces of the list and set them to the variable values one by one. So this should also work the same way. If I paste that there, works the same way. All right. So this is sort of the pattern of how we can input a line that has multiple things on it and then split it up. A lot of times you might not actually care about the line itself, so you might just do an input right here. You don't need to save the line per se as a variable. So you just read your input, split it up, map int onto it. If you were converting to numbers with decimal points, you'd want to map a float to that, or you'd want to map them to floats. In this case, we map to int, and as I said, the list is only, that list, extra list there is only if you want to print it out and be able to see it. This should work fine as far as the program is concerned without the list either. So this map, whatever map produces that type of object, works fine with the tuple assignment as well. And there we go.